2, 1, and go! Hello and welcome back. This is a very special edition of the story of Time Traveler. I'm going to tell you guys how I got my nickname. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but my real name is not Time Traveler. No. I actually go by Clover. That's my nickname. My real name is David. My family still calls me that. But the truth is, I have many names. You know, on my Discord, that I still go by my old skate shop name, which was Discate, so I'm Discate Shop on Discord. That's pretty fun. Anyway, but yeah, so I'm gonna tell you guys the story of how I got the name Clover, which is my nickname. It's a very unbelievable story, and I barely believe it myself, so I'm going to tell you ahead of time that it's all fiction and that I'm making it all up, and that none of it is true. I'm just going to tell you that. I'm going to throw it out there so that you can, at the end, just discredit, be like, okay, that was all fiction. I wasted my time and energy listening to all of this, but hopefully you found it entertaining. Anyway, so here's what's going on. I'm going to start in 1996, then I'm going to go backwards a little bit further. Okay, so in 1996, I met some time travelers that were from the future, and I was picking 4-leaf clovers, and I gave them each one, and then they said, we should call you Clover, and they all kind of looked at each other and smiled. They all knew that my name was already Clover, but that's that part of the story. Anyway, let's go back a little bit further. 1995. I just got out of high school. I went to my very first Grateful Dead show. The police raided my apartment and found weed, and I had this court date that I was supposed to go to, and I overslept. And then I decided, instead of going to court, I was just gonna skip town, and I was going to go on tour with the Dead. So as soon as I leave town, a couple months later, Jerry Garcia passes away, and so my whole plans, the whole universe was, working against me at this point, it seemed. And on my way to California, I stopped in Arkansas and met this girl, Cora. And we became boyfriend and girlfriend. We lived together from that point on. I was living in my car, and she was living in this place called The Cabin, which was just a place where a whole bunch of homeless people lived. But we were together for about a year and a half. We went on a fish tour together and stuff like that, and then we broke up, and I was heartbroken, and I went to stay at my friend Jeff and Danny's farm in Newton County, Arkansas, right off of the Buffalo River. They actually got their water from a creek that was spring fed that ran to the Buffalo River. Anyway, I was staying in the cabin, and we were there was this low water bridge, and it took, sometimes you couldn't even get across. We would have to park the car and then walk across the river, and but anyway, sometimes we would take the canoe from town. It was actually faster to take the canoe from town to the cabin than it was to drive back. So we'd drive the Volkswagen bus into town, put the canoe on top, and then get in the canoe and ride the canoe back home, and then have like Billy Barker or someone like that give us a ride the next day to get the bus back up there. Or Billy would drive it up there sometimes. That's happened a few times. Anyway, yeah, like we would just leave the keys in it. It's such a small town. Like anyone I don't know, like if they were gonna steal the car, they would probably put it back where it was after they were done with it. Anyway, um, on the way to the cabin along the river, there was how do I describe it? An encampment where this hermit lived. It was like a pretty crude-looking shelter built into the side of a cliff, and there was two of them there, an old man and a younger man that looked a lot younger because he was really small, really short, redhead, looked like a leprechaun. But everyone in town thought they were vampires. They had accents, and so how rumors spread in small towns. Anyway, this hermit and his son. The first time that I see him, Danny's like, "Those are vampires," and he starts paddling faster. He's like, "We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go." And I'm just like looking back, and I'm like, if they were even vampires, they wouldn't be able to. We couldn't paddle away from a vampire. Anyway, reason, right? Anyway, so one time I'm in the canoe and I'm by myself coming home, and I decided that I was gonna, stop and check it out. I saw the kid outside, and he's like, "You got the cigarette?" And I was like, yeah. So I gave him a cigarette. I was still a little bit scared that they might be vampires. I was alone. And we started talking. One thing led to another. We started talking about LSD, and I was talking about like how I understood how it was made and stuff like that. Which I really didn't. I knew the Anarchist cookbook recipe for making it, which is don't do that, don't make that stuff, don't eat that. Anyway, so I'm talking to him, and he's like, "You need to talk to my grandfather." And then I talked to his grandfather, and it turns out that they're fugitives, they're refugees, or whatever it's called. They fled from Germany in a stolen time machine that they stole in like 1940 or something like that, and basically took it all the way to 1984, 1985, somewhere around then. Whenever it was that the Berlin Wall fell in Germany, that's whenever they stopped. And they still didn't feel secure at that time, but the machine was destroyed. So they fled to the United States and lived, in those woods for 10 years while the grandfather was building another time machine to go forward. And they needed, as part of their fuel, synthesized ergot, which is a key. Basically, it's the same synthesization that they do to make LSD. So we had this idea that we would trace the LSD back to the people that were making it, and then we would get the source of the ergot, because that's really what he needed. He didn't need LSD, although I believe that could have worked. I don't know. We talked about it for hours, and I didn't understand what he was saying most of the time, because I have problems understanding people that have thick accents like that, and it was so long ago. But anyway, so we talked about this forever, and then we decide that we're gonna go to this music concert, Memphis in May, the Bill Street Blues Music Festival. Happens the first weekend of May every year, and this one was 1996. Memphis in May, 1996. That was exactly when and where everything crazy happened and started. So I stole Jeff and Danny's van. Danny was there, but Jeff was out of town, and I took the Volkswagen bus. And me and the the old man drove to the music festival. He made the son stay behind and watch the. Even though like we both protested, I was like, "Dude, let him come and say. He wants to see some music. He wants to experience life. Let the kid be a kid." Even though it was probably older, I don't know how old he was. He might have been like 30. Really short, small man, very, very small person. But they both were. The grandfather was even shorter than the grandson. But anyway, so we get to Memphis in May, and he stays in the bus while I go and walk around. I'm supposed to, find someone selling LSD, and I'm supposed to try to basically make my way to the person that's making it so that I can get the source of the ergot. Anyway, whenever I get there, it's not long after I am kind of like, working the crowds and stuff like that. I have some hemp necklaces that I made myself, and that was my plan. I was going to start with hemp necklaces. I was going to buy like a sheet of acid from somebody, and then I was going to, sell that one head at a time until I had enough to, buy a 10-pack, and then I was going to, and then once I, was able to, get rid of the 10-pack, then I was going to try to get a gram, and then I was going to try to, work my way. That was all, the plan that everyone always has that never works out every time that they have one of those plans. This time, it didn't work out. It did not work out. So I don't think that I'm about to say that it worked out. What happened was I was talking to somebody, and then they looked at me, gave me this weird face. They were like, and then they were. It was like. It was. I want to say that he said, "You're David, right?" And like before I even said my name or anything, I was like, yeah." And then he was like, "I need to ask you something. Are the vampires real?" And that freaked me out. Like I was like, and I just left, and then I went back to the bus, and I told the old man what happened, and I was sure that it was aliens. I was like, they were reading my mind. They they knew stuff about everything that nobody knew. No one else knows about this. I didn't even tell Jeff and Danny. Danny knew that I left with the vampires in the van. That's all that he knew. So anyway, what happened after that? Okay, so we go back to the van, and we're about to leave. Whenever I see the dude again, and he's like walking towards the Volkswagen bus. I'm like, he's got to be right. I mean, he like I was curious. I was and I said, that's him right there. And then I was like, for whatever reason, I was like, I feel like I should go talk to him. Like, maybe that is the guy that I'm supposed to talk to. So finally he's like, okay, go talk to him, but I'm gonna watch, and if anything weird happens, I'm gonna drive away. I was like, okay, that's fine. So I get out, and I go up to him, and they're like, and there was 4 of them, and they all looked at me, and they all smiled, and he was like, David, right? And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, this is gonna be very hard to believe, but we're from the future. We read a book that you write later on in your life, and you mentioned this time and date, and we came back here to this spot to help the old man fix his time machine. It's basically like, time travelers from the past meeting up with time travelers from the future, and the ones from the future are helping them out so that they're not stuck in. I mean, if you guys remember what the '90s were like, it just you know, I wouldn't have wanted my kids to have to grow up and go through all that. You know, some of those kids are still in prison for nonviolent crimes that they've done. You know, so like I can't blame the old man for wanting to. Well, anyway, so we get the or like they have it. They're like, here, this is what you need, and like, so yeah, it was like a plan worked, but it didn't work the way that I thought it was supposed to, and we go back to I go back to Danny's farm. They go back to their camp, and about a week later, I'm going by and I see the grandson, and he's like, "Hey, get over here, get over here!" And he's like, "Okay, we've got." They show me the machine, which they never did before, and they needed a third person to help them because the one that was built in Germany had all this equipment and stuff like that I guess pushed it through the portal and stuff like that. And they were using the river. Like they actually had this ring with wires that came up out of the water. I don't know what they actually did. Like, it was like tubes and wires, and then they had the vessel that they got in, which was just sort of like a long cigar thing that was all sealed. And then once it was locked down, I had to basically lock it to seal it, and then I had to hold it in the river, which it had like a little rope things attached to it, but I still had to kind of hold it because it wanted to go right or left. But basically I held it, and then whenever the thing it would turn blue, and then once it turned completely white, it would get brighter and brighter, and it throbs, underneath the water. And once it was white, it would, that was whenever he said push us through. And so I held and I wait, and then I pulled the rope to untie it, and then as soon as it turns white, and I push it through, and then the whole entire apparatus and everything disappears. As soon it just, and then like the river freezes, like basically just like a chunk of ice, kind of just all of a sudden, bloom, and then floats away. And then I go back 20 years later, and it appears. That they had a net that was still in their camp, still in the same place. The shack was all run down and everything, and it did look like some kids had been there, but it wasn't. But the net was still there, so I tied it from one side of the river to the other side of the river, whenever it came, the portal thing that they went through, that disappeared along with them. It reappeared and basically just fell flat onto the river bottom whenever the vessel came out, and then the vessel landed into the net, and then I went and I opened it up, and the smoke comes out, the fog comes out, and the professor reaches his hand up, and I help him out, and then I help the grandson out, and we it's 2020, right, and all this pandemic stuff had just happened, so it was like one of those conversations where I was like, okay, I gotta tell you, there's a virus that's going around right now, and no one really knew. I knew it was dangerous to people his age, and that he was really old, and So I was like, maybe you guys need to go further, and so that's what happened in 2020. We reset everything, set it all back up, and refueled the machine, and then sent it further, and it went 12 years forward. So it'll be coming out in 2032. Will be the next time that I gotta catch it. And so that's my story with the time travelers from the past. The time travelers from the future, there's some other weird stuff that happened there. Okay, so with some of the ergot, the professor made what he called the Akashic Opal, which it was this thing that you put underneath your tongue, and your mind would connect to like the ether, the Akashic record, supposedly is what he called it. And so you put this thing underneath your tongue, and then it takes a few seconds, but any question that you had, any strategy, any it would just come to you, in an instant, and then you pull it out. Like your mind couldn't handle it for too long. You could go maybe 60 seconds, and then you just had to pull it out because your brain would just be overwhelmed. Anyway, whenever they were leaving, they gave me the old man gave me this thing, and I was supposed to use it to fix our society or something like that. And the very first time that I used it, I put it into my mouth, and I was about to put it under my tongue, and someone knocked in behind me, and I accidentally swallowed it. And then I tried to throw it up, but I couldn't, and almost immediately I just started losing my mind, convulsing for at least a whole day. I don't know how long it was. I had no concept of time for that 24 to 48 hour period that it digested through my body. But as soon as it came out, I was completely brain dead. Like I had wiped all memory from my mind completely. I didn't know anything. The only bodily functions that were taking over were the automatic ones. Breathe, and then I kind of felt it in my pants, like where it had came out, and for whatever reason my hand reached and to the back of my pants, and then I pulled it out. I remember I looked at it, and I put it under my tongue, and then just a second later my memories come back, and I take it out, and I'm like, holy shit. And I put it in my bead box. I closed my bead box up. I put my bead box in my backpack, and then people are like, I shit my pants, and I vomited all over the place. It was disgusting. But so I went to sleep after that, because I was famished. I drank a bunch of water, and people were trying to give me food, but I couldn't eat. And I did drink water, and I went to sleep, and my backpack was on the tree right next to me. And whenever I woke up, my backpack was gone. The first thing I did was I looked at my backpack, and I saw that my skateboard was on the ground. I was like, my backpack is gone. And I got up, and I started looking everywhere. I went through people's tents. I went through the parking lot. I was looking in cars. I was asking, and there was other people that were like, yeah, someone went through and stole a bunch of backpacks from people last night. And no one knew who it was. And so for the longest time, this rainbow gathering where this happened was in Carbondale, Illinois, southern Illinois. So for the longest time, I went to pawn shops nearby, hoping that I would see it. It looked like an opal. I call it the Akashic opal, but it could have been mistaken for that, and whoever had it would have not known what it was. It would have not known how to use it. But if they did, it's like one of those things like in Lord of the Rings, where they have that one ring that's just like, well, okay, so here comes 2020, right? I with the time travelers, I did get to go to a few Grateful Dead shows. The ones from the future, their machine goes backwards and forwards. The ones from the past, their machine only goes forward, and they really have no reason to go backwards. The only reason that they would want to go backwards would be to change things, which they know that they can't. But actually, they can, but they don't really realize it. But it still kind of doesn't count. I don't know, it's hard to explain a bunch of stuff. But for years, I lived with this secret. I eventually got married twice, and I didn't tell anyone. I mean, Danny knew. I told some people in Arkansas, so there was definitely and actually Jeff's band, the Flip Off Pirates, Jeff wrote a song about based on the experience where the aliens were asking if the vampires were real, and then the vampires were asking if the aliens were real, but turns out none of them were actually aliens or vampires. They were just time travelers, which is kind of silly. But yeah, that's the 27-minute nutshell version of how I got the name Clover. Oh yeah. So which I never did explain, did I? So whenever I finally went back out and confronted them, I started picking 4-leaf clovers on the ground, because there was just a bunch of them right there, and I picked one for each of us, and they kind of all looked at each other and said, "We should call you Clover." And that was like this funny thing to them for whatever reason, but I didn't get it. But I guess if they read my book, then they would know. Oh, and there it is, a half an hour of your life wasted on a story that I told you at the very beginning was fiction, and that I made it all up, and none of it is real. Okay? So, always remember that. I'm gonna do all kinds of stuff to throw people off. I'm gonna throw out predictions that are wrong, and say things that are they're just gonna be like no. But then I'm gonna do other things like my September 2024 prediction. Write that one down on the calendar. That's about a year away from, or 2 years away from now, and if I'm right, then we're all gonna be very rich. If I'm wrong, then it doesn't really matter, because we're all going to be very poor anyway. Alright. So long, and thanks for all the fish.